This morning, we're going to do the second part of the first missionary journey of Paul and Barnabas. So it's Acts 14. Before we start, I almost feel like I need to have a disclaimer. It's the first time I'm doing this. So I don't know how it's going to come out. I also tend to say some funny things. My children, my wife definitely think so. English is my second language. I learned it when I was 20. So sometimes things come out very funny. And that's the comedy value that maybe we can add to this. But I am excited. As I prayed and pondered over Acts 14, it was as if the Lord was... it was just showing me how our life, the threads of our life, have a lot of parallels to Acts 14. So it feels it's quite easy to stand here. So this morning when they prayed for me, I felt I should be very nervous standing in front of you and talking, but I'm not. And maybe it's because it's my story. And it is how God has taught us things. And so I'm going to summarize Acts 13 and 14 briefly. Vince spoke on Acts 13 2 weeks ago. And it's basically the first time since Jesus said to us, go into all the world and preach the gospel. Paul and Barnabas sets off on this intentional journey to take the gospel out. So first time it was intentional. Peter and Cornelius wasn't intentional. Peter standing up after Pentecost was not intentional. It was an explanation and 3,000 were added. Paul and Barnabas intentionally go out to take the gospel. And also to just understand in these two chapters, you can read this in 12 minutes, chapter 13 and 14, but it expands over 2 years is what actually written there. So many times we think it's bang, bang, bang. It took over 2 years what's written in 13 and 14. The also other interesting thing about this is this is where they established the churches in Galatia. So Galatia was a whole region. And apparently, because I did a little bit of reading, is the Celts from Western Europe invaded that area 300 years previously. So it's called Galatians after the Celts. And so this is where the church is established, the first church really, and Galatians apparently is the earliest book that was written in the New Testament as well. So that's just a bit of background. But what happens? They set off to Cyprus. They find synagogues because that's what they knew, and they start preaching, and an amazing response every time they preach. They go to the governor, who heard about them on Cyprus, Paul said, and there was a Jewish man who didn't like what Paul and Barnabas were doing, and Paul called him out. He was struck blind, and the governor believed, and they felt they had God's power, so they went on. And the next place they got to, in the Pisidian Antioch, Paul reels with this amazing history of the Jewish people. He brings in the gospel. People were so excited. It says the next week, everyone in town almost turned up to hear them. And so he had this amazing gift, but extraordinarily, it only took a few people to turn the minds of everyone against them. And it was so quick that they were expelled from there. So basically, they had to dust their feet off, and they went on. And then we get to Acts 14. And they go to Iconium, and the same thing happens. And that's actually how the chapter starts. It said the same thing happens in Iconium. They find the synagogue, They preach very powerfully, it says, and many people believed. And it also says then, as soon as the people believed, some Jews among them poisoned the people against them. And Paul's and Barnabas's response is, they decided to stay longer. Where you would think, you know, people, if you guys are poison against me, I'm going to leg it. But they decided to stay longer. And it says that their preaching was accompanied by signs and wonders. And so the whole town was then divided. Some were for Paul and Barnabas, some against them. But again, there was a plot to stone them and to harm them. They learned about it and they left. And then they got to another place. And this new place they got to in Lystra had no synagogue. Now there had to be 10 Jewish men to establish a synagogue. That's how it worked. Lystra didn't have a synagogue. So Paul just preached. So there's no church or gathering place. This is in the marketplace. And what does God do? An amazing miracle. A crippled man looked at Paul. Paul saw he's looking intently. He heals him. And everyone is like, flippin' heck, the gods have come down. And they called Barnabas Zeus because he was the leader, interestingly. And they called Paul Hermes because he was the speaker, the one who spoke all the time. So they decided they're going to sacrifice bulls and stuff on the altar outside. There was a temple of Zeus outside the town in Lystra, and everyone, and Paul and Barnabas says that they tore their clothes and they thought, this has gone really badly wrong. You know, this is the absolute opposite of what we are trying to do here. And they try to explain to them, they say, listen, people, this is not, leave your worthless gods. We are proclaiming to you the God that created heaven and earth, the one that brings you harvests, the ones that fills your hearts with happiness. He's the one that we are bringing, but it says that they could scarcely stop them from sacrificing. And then, from the previous 2 towns, Jews rocked up, and where these people were so excited calling them gods, suddenly turned and decided they're going to stone them. And so they got Paul. I reckon Barnabas was much faster than Paul because he didn't get stoned. But Paul got stoned, and they say they dragged him out of town and they left him for dead. And if you know anything about the Galatians being a warrior tribe who invaded, they were a fierce people. So they probably give it proper stoning. It says the believers gathered around Paul and he got up, went into town, and the next day they left for Derbe, another town where they had to walk to. And in Derbe, they preached, many disciples were made, it says, and then they backtracked. They went back to all the towns, even the ones where he was stoned. They went back there. They went all back to Lystra. They went back to Antioch, the one in Turkey, not the other one. And then they went back by ship to where they started, where the church in Antioch laid hands on them. And what Paul and Barnabas said, one line that got me, and which is what I want to share to you now, is it says, when he encouraged the churches going back, he says, we must suffer many hardships to enter the kingdom of God. And as he reported back in Antioch right at the end, he said to the church, God has opened the door to the Gentiles. And the church has established. Now, as a Gentile here, that's probably why I'm here today. And my story, God ambushed me when I was 17 years old. I didn't look for him. I wasn't interested. and I walked straight into it, and it turned my life completely around. And it's another story. But as soon as God turned my heart around, I knew that I wanted to live my life for him. There was this burning thing of missions burning in my heart that I want to tell other people about it. But first I had to do my military service in South Africa. So I went to the army, and I didn't want to go to the army, but I had to go. And in the army, I went through my first proper trials where I remember being a Christian in the army was not a good thing. And they really had it in for me particularly. But I found a few likely-minded people who were very much pursuing God, and it was amazing. In the army, my faith grew massively, but it was very hard. Went to YWAM because I wanted to be with other young people, wanted missions, and something stirred in my heart. It's a good time. I then came over to the UK in 1995. I was living up in Lancashire, meeting Christians. I worked with Andy Hawthorne and the Message Tribe early on, did loads of stuff. And then in 1999, I met my ministry partner in Jerusalem. I met Becca in Jerusalem. We got married, started out in South Africa. Again, very interestingly, very difficult. Really hard time we had right in the beginning, feeling God is calling us to something. We came back to the UK. I worked for Neowine, and we were always had this heart for missions. And we had a friend out in Kenya who we supported. We supported him financially. We supported through prayer, and we thought we could really support this mission. And we even went out there to have a look at it, and we thought, this is amazing, but we could never live here, was the response. And we were on holiday, I think, in South Africa, and both of us woke up one morning with this burning desire to pack everything up, to leave our jobs, and to go to Kenya, to serve in the field. And it was something that God has done in our hearts, something that we would then name the call. It was where we were properly called, and it was really strong. But what happened before we went out, there was a real preparation time for us. Looking back now, talking to you, there's been preparation since I was very young in many stages. And in Kenya, it became really prominent. Certain areas of my life I thought was irrelevant became really, really relevant. So there was a preparation of experience, and there was a preparation of us going to Bible college. So before we went out to Kenya, Becca insisted we have to go and study and get prepared to go out. I was on the other hand thinking, a lot of money, what are they going to teach me in England about Africa? I was born in Africa, I can do this. I was very, very wrong. So we went to Bible school, we got prepared, and it was the thing, I think, that kept us there, was the preparation. So we go out to Africa. We fly out with our 3 young children. Talia was 20 months old, the others 4 and 6. We arrived in the middle of nowhere to an absolute mess. And it was not like what we expected it to be. It was not good. And the first reaction was, oh my goodness, we've given up our jobs. We've brought our kids out here. There's no hospital. There's no school then. Shops were at the time 6 weeks away, because every 6 weeks we had an opportunity to go to town. So everything was just immediately very difficult. But the most difficult thing was we joined a team that wasn't working. We joined a friend who we supported, who was completely burnt out and who's lost his bearings completely. And the first thing we did was we decided we have to gather whoever is around us and pray. We have to press into God. And it was either that or packing up and leaving. But because the call was so strong, we didn't pack up. So one of the things that I'm going to share with you as I go through our story is God's given us a toolkit that we learn to use when you go through trials and tribulations. And going through the story of Paul and Barnabas, Paul obviously learned this toolkit himself. We learned about what he says, when you go through persecutions, this is what happens in you. It births character, then it leads to perseverance. And there's lots in the scriptures about it. This toolkit really helped us a lot. But the difficulties we immediately faced in Kenya started, shaped the work that was to start. And that was an interesting thing, that looking back on it, Becca was homeschooling, I wasn't helping. And it was really hard to homeschool 3 little children in the middle of nowhere. And they were saying, oh, we want friends, we want to go to school. So we joined together with a few Maasai parents and started a school. The school has now grown. There's 250 children in the school, and it's doing really well. And the children in the school are hearing the gospel, which is great. We needed vegetables because we were always 6 weeks away from the shops. So we realized we have to start growing things, and I didn't know how to grow anything. But whatever we planted started growing. So it was like a kitchen garden. That kitchen garden is now a small farm that supplements 13,000 meals every month. Our water kept breaking to the house. We had this old gravity-fed system that was just old galvanized pipes kept breaking. So we fixed the water. And then with our clinic data, we realized we need to fix the village's water. And suddenly we started all these water projects. And now thousands and thousands of people having clean water. But it was all the struggles that we faced, God suddenly turned them around. But in the beginning, what happened is the mess we thought was a mess was like from the frying pan into the fire. It just got worse. The friend that we joined in this mission, he got quite upset when the community started celebrating all these new things that was starting up. And so it didn't look like the vision that he had for that community. He was very burnt out at the time. And what he then did, he decided to turn the community leaders against us. And the first time we left Maasai land, we were there for 2 years straight, and then we came back to the UK for a break. And we had our break, we went back out, and when we got back to the bush, there were 40 Maasai elders and chiefs in our house waiting for us. And I remember it was across a weekend. They were really interrogating me, saying, why are you here? What's your intentions? And all sorts of stuff. And it suddenly looked quite ropey, the whole thing. You know, you as a guest in a very, very different culture. Then they called this thing called the community barasa, which is the way the Maasai solve their problems, like a kangaroo court. So everyone turns up. There were hundreds and hundreds of people in town. And then the guy who's got a grievance against the other guy has to make it public known. So here, my best friend, who was best man at my wedding, whom we've been supporting for years, makes his grievances known, but also did a terrible thing in a sense that he told the community leaders that he don't respect their leadership and stuff, and that he basically had the last say on the matter. We at the time was like, we don't think we can deal with this. It's already hard enough. We've left to this place. It's been messy for 2 years then. We want to go. So we said to the community, we're happy to go, thank you. And at that, the chief said, no, we want you to stay. We are really excited about what is happening at the school. We're really excited about what's happening with the medical care. We were setting up a clinic as well. We want you to stay. And then it just got worse. The town was divided at the time. So it's very much like this. This is why I feel the whole journey of Paul and Barnabas is very much similar. So we've got there was a group of people then decided they need to get rid of us. So what they did was they went to the district officer who was the head of police over the whole of the Loita Hills, which is where we are, and they laid charges there against me. So I had to go there to answer the charges. When that didn't work, they went to the district commissioner, which was in Narok, the town we would visit every 6 weeks. It's about 6 hours drive away from our house. There they laid charges. I had to listen. He had to then investigate the situation. Then it went to the county commissioner, the whole county policeman, then came down. He called, I remember when he came to the house, he wouldn't come into the house. He hardly shake my hand. He said, so you are the controversial Hennie. So the word was spreading about me everywhere. And at the time, more things started happening. They wrote to the Archbishop of Kenya to make a complaint about us because we got a missionary permit under the Anglican Church. They eventually wrote to Justin Welby, who was Archbishop then. We had to come over to answer charges or to explain what was happening. And everywhere that this case was growing, the ministry got known. But it was felt like this. And then finally, if it couldn't get any worse, I was served with a court case, a high court case in Kenya. That lasted for 5 years, I think. And it was really, really stressful. Going to Africa to really believe God has called you. So we had the call, we started seeing the fruits, so things were going well. Then people turned against us and everything was going wrong. So that is a bit of a context of what we felt when we went into mission in Africa. So all these things were happening. To sum it up, in the end, I remember there were threats that they're going to burn the house down. And we had a volunteer coming. There was a volunteer staying with us and who had a dream one night that the house was burning down, who didn't know what was going on. And it was like there was this real, almost tangible nastiness about what was going on with this, like a spirit, a real spiritual thing. They threatened to poison the water supply. Every time I had to go out to go and see these, to answer my case at the police, Becca would get a group of people that come and intimidate her when I'm away. So it was really, really difficult. Our ambulance that was shipped up from the UK to help with the medical care was stolen. Just everything went wrong. They cut our internet, and we were like, what do we do now? And in that whole time, the response was, we have to press into God. It was like almost unbelievably difficult. I remember feeling like I'm losing my mind, being out there, thinking like, is it possible to bear what is going on? Is it worth it? And I remember back here, before we went out, I used to pray very respectable prayers, but out there, I shouted a lot at God. I remember my prayers were really loud and were really directed at God, and it was almost like you had no backup system. There were no local church we could go to for support. There were no internet, there were no mobile reception. We had no correspondence with our church in the first 2 years at all when this was going on. So you just felt completely alone. And so the response was pressing into God. And I'm going to show you now, or take you through a toolkit that God shown us. And it also came from a book that was really instrumental, and which you might want to, if you go through a difficult time, even if you don't, I would really recommend reading. And it's a book called Strengthen Yourself in the Lord. It's a very, very good book. And in there, lots of this toolkit you will find. But it was very key for our journey out there. What happened was, as we press into God, God started clearly guiding our steps. It was amazing to be out there going through this unbelievable stress, pressing into God, and then hearing him starting to speak very, very clearly. I remember Becca sitting up many, many evenings in the middle of the night, about 2 a.m. She would sit and just scribble in notebooks, and we still have the notebooks. And in these notebooks, there were instructions. This is what I'd want you to do. It's like God gave us a step-by-step, all the way through this, like really dark time. So every day felt really tricky to navigate through, but it felt like you had a plan through this difficulty. And then something happened in us. I remember we going into the Psalms, because that's where David really poured his heart out. And it felt like we were finding our voice in the Psalms as we started reading and pressing into them. The Psalms was really important. The big key thing for us as a team, we got together every single morning in prayer and worship. So before any work started, the Maasai team around us got together in prayer and worship, and we prayed and we worshiped, and we saw God turning up every time, like a tangible presence of God every single morning. As we start our day, and it was really, really powerful. And as we did that, it felt like the problem started to shrink the more God became bigger. And that was a perspective thing, I think, that changed for us, because the problems didn't disappear. The court case was there, the intimidation was there, the hardships was there, but it was, as Vince said earlier, it was pursuing the presence of God. That really, really did things. And then we started to see breakthrough. I remember it was about 2015. So this is 6 years into our journey there. we started to see a real breakthrough. We the court case was ongoing. There was affidavits and to and froing, and there was hearings. And what happened was the chiefs in the community, the Maasai's got their own government called the Council of Elders, and the Kenyan government even recognized them as their own legal entity so they could solve problems. So they came and investigated the whole thing for 4 days, the Maasai government. And in the end, they assembled a group of people and went to the High Court for us. So I never attended court personally, no. So the Maasai stood in. The bishop who stood up for us in the beginning, interestingly, was then made Archbishop of Kenya. And so he then decided to sit on our board of the charity. The DC, district commissioner in the nearest town, stood up to the county commissioner and basically cleared my name. Tiafan's lawyers stood in. And what happened was, through this time, the attacks didn't stop. But what happened, a clear pattern, was that every time we were attacked, it was followed by a blessing. And it became such a pattern that I remember when we were hit by something really bad, we got excited and we would say, soon something is going to happen that's going to be. I think Becca's going to have to, she's going to have to write the book, because there's a lot of examples, but I'm not going to go on because of time. We saw God pouring his blessing out through this time. And so it all, so 13 years later, today, 13 years later, since we went out, the work is growing, continuing. Since then, I've now went back last year in October, but I've now reconciled with this friend who has taken us to court. God really spoke to me about having to reconcile and going through that. And that was very much a God thing. But I want to just summarize and finish by so the court case in the end was, when the Maasai government and chiefs went to the court, the judge basically kicked it out. So after 5 years, so I was, what's it called? What's the English word? I was cleared and stuff, which was really good. I remember before that, what I didn't mention, I was also taken to the CID, the Criminal Investigation Department, and I had my fingerprints taken. And you were so nervous because you never knew in Africa, a brown envelope with a bit of money can change anything. And so being cleared was a great thing, great feeling. So the toolkit that I want to leave you with in this, and I can probably post this on the WhatsApp or something if people want, but you will also find it in Strengthen Yourself in the Lord, is know your calling. For us, that was really important. And you might sit there thinking, I don't have a calling. I'm sitting here in Axminster doing my job, or in East Devon, whatever it is. All of us have a calling from God. It is there. Ours was very particularly and clear, and it helped. But if you search scriptures, it is there. God has called each one of us. Matthew 28 says, all of us are called. Preparation. Look through your life, that things you've been through, particularly the difficult things, were the things that made you resilient and helped you. I can go into what happened in the army, but the army created a lot of resilience in me and helped me to go through things later on that I would have not been able to go through. The strength we test are not the ones that challenge our strengths, but the ones that expose our weaknesses. So tests help to bring out what are the things. Intimacy with God. That's very, very important. Like I said, my prayer life changed in Kenya. I would say all these nice prayers, but in Kenya, it was really much shouting at God. And God became, I think, very real in Kenya. And I think it could be why he said to David, he's a man after my own heart. Because it was somebody, if you read the Psalms and you look at David, he was shouting a lot at God through those Psalms. A third of all Psalms are Psalms of lament, are Psalms of crying out to God. And intimacy with God is the thing that will hold you. Understanding that we are called to take up the cross. The cross is not a very popular subject. It is not easy. And I think Paul really experienced what it meant to take up the cross. But he didn't say that. Jesus said, pick up your cross and follow me. The cross is so important. It carries a blessing with it to everyone around us when you pick up your cross. Read the Psalms, find your voice in them. Worship and thankfulness. When we worship, we get the right perspective of God. God becomes bigger and our problems become smaller. Praying and fellowshipping together. For us as a team, every morning to start that was so important. Me and Becca praying together so regularly, going through, was what held us together. But it's that team unity around us that keeps encouraging you. What Cleo said earlier, you can throw the arrowheads in, but it's the people behind you, the people around you that keeps you basically going. And for us, that was very true. Praying in tongues. Praying in tongues edifies yourself, but I found out in Kenya, it was so important for going through things. When you don't know how to pray, when you don't know what to pray, just praying in tongues really felt like it strengthened me. I'm not a massive advocate saying you have to go and pray in tongues and go and find it, but I would say it's a gift that God gives to those who asked. And for us, it was an incredible tool to have, and one I used every day, still uses. Listening to God, as we leaned in, we saw God speaking. And I'm not very prophetic. I think Becca is very prophetic. She's got the gift, I must say, and even a lot of this comes from Becca that I'm reeling off. Becca, hear God, but it is our responsibility to listen. If we stop and listen, God speaks. He drops it in, and he speaks differently to each one of us. It's not audible. He can speak audible, but it's not audible for most of us. It's through pictures and all sorts, and he spoke to us. I remember he spoke to us. It was through a dung beetle. You know, a dung beetle, rolling a dung, and we were walking up to the local school where the kids were, and it was a big hill, and there was this dung beetle halfway up the hill, and it was a really difficult time, and suddenly we were drawn to the dung beetle, and just seeing this guy shoveling his up the hill, and that felt like us, you know, you just shoveling. And what was it, what the Lord said? He says about getting to the top of the hill. If we don't get to the top, we will never enjoy the view. So you could give up halfway, and you see this dung beetle kept going, just didn't give up. The thing would roll down, and it would just go and pick it up and keep going. And then also he said, when you're going through a difficult time, when you're going uphill, go slow. Don't push yourself. Encourage each other. We had a lot of encouragement in this difficult time. Rest. You need to rest regularly. I think that's why we as a church in general, not speaking about church here, don't take Sabbath seriously. We were in the bush. I remember coming around a corner in a Land Rover and nearly hitting another vehicle. It's a bit like a bush track. And in this other vehicle, this is right in the beginning when the court case just started, was another 4x4 safari vehicle. And I just veered off into the bush, and we stopped like next to this vehicle. And there was a Maasai guy driving, and next to him sat a European woman that he was driving. Never seen another car on this road. And I'm like, yeah, just thankful we didn't hit one another. And this lady leaned over and she says, Hennie? And it was somebody I didn't know very well, but we were at school together. And this is, gosh, this like more than 20 years before I seen her. And she was only managing one of the poshest lodges in the Maasai Mara. And I remember she immediately got talking to us, and God would give us these R&Rs for free. So we were giving like really posh holidays we could never ever afford for free. It was in the Mara. I remember somebody else gave us their house on the coast, and it was like God knew what you needed, but you had to rest. So for those of you going through a really tough time, rest. Laughter and humor, we have to laugh through this, and we have to keep a sense of humor. And you guys know Becca you will always laugh when you have Becca around you. So lots of fun and laughter. And then lastly, intercessory prayer. We got people to pray for us. And those are the people who break into the darkness, people that help to hold you, and people that change situations. And that's what I want to finish off is we are all called. We will go through hard times if you go out. If you sit where you are, it might be easier, but you will never experience God speaking to you powerfully if you don't engage in what he's called you to do. And East Devon is an amazing place where so many people need to hear about Jesus. And I want to encourage each one of us to go out and to expect God to work and to do amazing stuff, but also expect that you're going to have to pick up your cross. And there's a toolkit he's given us. And I would not trade the last 13 years for anything. I often think if I sat in my cozy job in London and never went out, what would have happened? Can I pray? Father, I thank you that you got Paul and Barnabas to go out, and as a consequence, the world was evangelized. There were more missions after that. I want to thank you that you've called us as a family to go, and I want to thank you for each one sitting here, Lord, that you've got a call on their lives as well. Be it to be here in Axminster, wherever they are, that they have got you in their hearts and somebody who needs to hear your voice. So, Father, my prayer is that you would equip this church, that you would equip all of us with a toolkit we need to go out and to take your word to the people around us, to see your kingdom established even through trials and tribulations. In your name, Jesus. Amen.
Hennie, thank you so much. What a privilege, isn't it, to hear that wonderful story. Hennie, bless you. Thank you for bringing scripture alive to us and just going through that. So, you know, it just comes together, doesn't it? The glory and the success and the difficulty and the pain. So if life is hard, don't worry you're getting something wrong. You know, there's stuff there that is going to bless you. Good Friday was awful.